Sarah Mitchell had always believed in God, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to face. A routine hospital visit turned into a fight for her life, one she would lose for 9 long minutes. In those moments of death, she left her body, entered a brilliant realm of light, and stood face to face with Jesus himself. What he revealed about why his chosen one's struggle financially would shake her to the core and change everything. Here is her personal testimony.
My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 43 years old, a mother of 2, and a woman of deep faith. I have believed in Jesus since I was a child. My parents raised me in the church, and I was taught to trust God in all things. No matter what happened, I was told, God will provide. And I believed it with all my heart. But as I grew older, life tested that belief in ways I never imagined. For years, I struggled financially, even though I did everything the Bible says. I tithed faithfully. I prayed every night. I tried my best to be a good Christian. I worked hard as a nurse, caring for children in the hospital. I was not lazy. I was not reckless with my money. Yet, no matter how much I prayed or how hard I worked, I always found myself living paycheck to paycheck. The bills never stopped. Rent, food, gas, medical expenses. It was a never-ending battle. My husband left us 5 years ago, and I had to raise my 2 kids alone. He gave no support, no help, nothing. I felt abandoned, not just by him, but sometimes, if I was honest, by God too. I had seen people around me, some who did not even believe in God, living in comfort. They had big houses, new cars, vacations. Some of them never prayed a day in their lives. Yet, they never seemed to struggle like I did. I couldn't help but ask, why? Why did it feel like the more I trusted God, the harder life became? Why was I drowning in bills when I had done nothing wrong? Why did my children have to suffer with me? There were nights I cried myself to sleep, whispering, God, do you see me? Do you care? One of the lowest moments of my life came just 2 weeks before my near-death experience. I was behind on rent, and my landlord was threatening to evict us. My car had broken down again, and I had no way to pay for repairs. I had only $20 left in my bank account, and payday was still a week away. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the overdue bills spread out in front of me. My kids were asleep in the next room, and I felt so ashamed. A mother should be able to provide for her children, but I had nothing left to give. I folded my hands and prayed, Lord, I don't need riches. I just need enough. Enough to take care of my children. Enough to stop feeling like I am barely surviving. Please, just help me. I waited for an answer. But no miracle money appeared. No sudden blessing came. The bills were still there, and so was the fear. The stress of it all was weighing on me, and I didn't realize how much it was also affecting my health. I had been feeling sick for days, stomach pain that wouldn't go away. I ignored it, thinking it was just stress. Nurses like me are used to putting our own pain last. I had patients to take care of. I had my kids to worry about. I didn't have time to be sick. But the pain got worse. By the 3rd night, I could barely stand. Every movement felt like fire ripping through my stomach. I tried to sleep, but the pain kept me awake. Around 2 in the morning, I finally gave in. I called a friend to watch my kids and drove myself to the hospital. When I arrived, the doctors ran some tests and quickly found the problem. My appendix had ruptured. The infection was spreading, and I needed surgery immediately. I was too weak to fight it. They rushed me to the operating room, and I remember lying on the table, looking up at the bright lights above me. For a moment, I felt fear. What if I didn't wake up? What would happen to my children? I closed my eyes and whispered one last prayer. Jesus, if I don't make it, please take care of my babies. Then, everything went dark. The last thing I remember was the mask being placed over my face as the anesthesiologist told me to take a deep breath. The bright operating room lights blurred, and I felt myself sinking into darkness. Then, suddenly, I was awake. But something was different. I could see the doctors and nurses rushing around me, their faces tense. The heart monitor was screaming with loud, flat tones. One doctor was pressing on my chest, shouting for more medicine. Another nurse was wiping tears from her eyes. I was confused. Why were they so panicked? Why was I looking down at them? Then I realized I wasn't in my body anymore. I floated above the operating table, watching everything unfold below me. But I felt no fear, no pain, no sadness. The awful stomach pain that had tormented me for days was gone. I felt weightless, like I was wrapped in something soft and warm. I tried to speak, but my words made no sound. No one could see me. No one knew I was there. A strange calmness settled over me. For the first time in years, I was not stressed, not worried about bills, not thinking about what I needed to do next. I just was. Then I noticed something. A light so bright, so alive, was appearing in the distance. It wasn't just light as we know it. It was something more. It had warmth, like a hug. It had love, like a mother holding her child. Pulled me in, and I felt myself moving toward it, though I wasn't walking. As I got closer, everything else faded away. The sounds of the hospital, the voices of the doctors, even the room itself, they no longer mattered. The light was everything. It wasn't just shining on me. It was shining through me, filling every part of me with love so deep that I almost wept. It felt like home. For the first time in my life, I felt completely known, not just for the good things I had done, but for every mistake, every failure, every hidden thought I was too ashamed to admit. Yet, instead of judgment, I felt total love. I never wanted to leave. I had no more hunger, no more exhaustion, no more worries about money, no more stress about my kids. I had everything I had ever needed in this light. Then, I heard a voice, strong but gentle, powerful yet filled with love. Sarah. It was not just calling my name, it was calling me. I turned toward the voice, though I had no body to turn with. And in that moment, I saw him. I turned toward the voice, though I had no body to turn with. And there he was. Jesus. I had heard about him my whole life. I had prayed to him since I was a little girl. But nothing could have prepared me for what it felt like to stand before him. He was light, but not like the sun or a lamp. His very presence was light. It moved through him, around him, as if he was made of something beyond anything on earth. His eyes held all the wisdom of the universe, yet they looked at me as if I were the only person who had ever existed. I expected to feel small, ashamed of my failures, my doubts, my anger over my struggles. But instead, when his eyes met mine, I felt something I had never fully known before. I was loved. Not because I had done everything right. Not because I had prayed enough or given enough or worked hard enough. I was loved simply because I was his. Tears would have filled my eyes if I had a body. Then I saw his hands. The scars. They weren't wounds anymore, but they glowed, pulsing with a light that seemed to carry a story of pain, sacrifice, and victory all at once. The hands that had been nailed to a cross were now reaching out to me. Sarah, he said, and his voice filled everything around me. I have brought you here to show you the truth about your struggles. I wanted to speak, to ask him why my life had been so hard. But before I could, the space around us shifted. It was like watching a curtain being pulled back. Scenes appeared before me, not just images, but living moments, as if I was stepping into another world. I will show you, Jesus said, why my chosen ones struggle. And with that, the revelation began. Jesus lifted his hand, and the space around us changed. It was as if the air itself had become alive, swirling and shifting like mist parting to reveal something beyond time. Before me, I saw a vast expanse, stretching farther than my eyes could see. In this place, there were people, thousands, maybe millions. Some stood, others knelt, but they all had the same desperate look on their faces. I could hear them praying. Their voices rose together, some whispering, some weeping, others crying out, Lord, please provide for me. God, I can't pay my bills. I don't know what to do. Father, I have been faithful. Why am I still struggling? I watched as a woman held an eviction notice in trembling hands, begging God to help her find a way to stay in her home. A father clutched an empty wallet, looking at his hungry children with tears in his eyes. A young couple prayed over their bills, their voices raw with fear. My chest ached as I looked at them. Their pain was my pain. I had prayed these same prayers, felt the same fear, carried the same burdens. I turned to Jesus. Why? I asked. Why are so many of us suffering like this? He looked at me, his eyes filled with something deeper than sadness. Understanding. Watch, he said. The scene before me changed. I could now see both the physical world and something beyond it. It It was like I had been blind before and was only now seeing what was really happening. Above each struggling believer, I saw something I hadn't expected, a shield of light. I gasped. I had thought they were trapped in darkness, but here was something holy surrounding them. Jesus nodded. What looks like lack, he said, is actually my protection. I didn't understand. Protection? From what? These people were suffering. How could this struggle be protection? Jesus waved his hand again, and I saw something new, alternative lives, different futures that could have been. In one scene, a man who had been praying for financial breakthrough suddenly won a great sum of money. First, he rejoiced, praising God for his blessing. But then, as the months passed, I saw his heart change. His prayers became shorter. Church became less important. He started trusting his wealth instead of God. Eventually, he stopped praying altogether. Another scene showed a woman who had long begged for a successful business. When she finally achieved it, he became consumed by it. Greed crept in. Her time with her family disappeared. He became harsh, controlling, so different from the gentle, faithful woman who once prayed on her knees. They do not see what I see, Jesus said. They beg for riches, but many of them are not ready for the weight that wealth brings. What they call lack is my mercy, keeping them from destruction. I watched in stunned silence. The people in those visions had no idea that their struggles were actually saving them. They only saw what was missing, not why it was missing. Jesus turned back to the people praying below. Some of my most faithful children curse the very thing that is protecting them. They believe I have forgotten them, but I have not. I am keeping them close, guarding their souls even when they do not understand. His words shook me. How many times had I cried out, asking why God wasn't blessing me? How many times had I thought he had abandoned me? And yet, all along, he was shielding me. I looked back at the people, still pleading for financial relief, unaware of the unseen battle over their souls. Jesus turned to me again. This is only the beginning. There is more I must show you. And as he spoke, the vision shifted once more. The vision shifted again. I now saw different versions of the same believers I had just watched crying out for help. But this time, something had changed. They had received the wealth they prayed for. At first, there was joy. They praised God, tears of relief running down their faces. Some bought new homes, others started businesses. I saw bank accounts overflowing, debts erased, lives transformed in an instant. But then, slowly, things began to shift. I watched as a woman who once spent hours in prayer now barely whispered a word to God. She was too busy, managing her success, keeping up with her new lifestyle. A man who had faithfully tithed when he had little now held on to his wealth tightly, afraid to lose it. His heart had changed. Money had become his new security, his new God. Another young couple had prayed for financial breakthrough for years. When it came, they celebrated. But as time passed, I saw their priorities drift. They stopped going to church as often. The husband, once devoted to God, now poured his time into growing his business. His wife, once content in faith, now longed for more money, more comfort, more success. Jesus looked at me, his voice steady but filled with sorrow. Many of my children pray for wealth, but it would destroy them before they are ready. I felt my heart tremble. I had always believed that more money would make things better. That if I just had enough, my problems would go away. But here I was, seeing the truth. Riches without spiritual maturity were a trap. Jesus continued, they think money will bring them freedom, but often, it enslaves them. They forget me, trust in their wealth, and drift away from their true purpose. I looked back at the scenes unfolding before me. These people had once prayed like I had. They had cried out, just as I had. And now, instead of growing closer to God, they had grown apart. I turned to Jesus, overwhelmed. Then what is the answer? He reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. There is more I must show you. And just like that, the vision changed again. The vision shifted once more. The scenes of wealth and distraction faded, and suddenly, I saw something far more terrifying. Dark shadows moved across the earth. They slithered around homes, businesses, and workplaces. I saw them whispering in people's ears, stirring up fear, doubt, and frustration. Then I saw something that sent chills through me. They were targeting believers. Not just any believers, but the ones who had been crying out for God's help. The ones who had remained faithful despite their struggles. The ones who carried powerful callings. I watched as a man who had been praying for financial relief suddenly lost his job. A single mother had her car break down the same week her rent was due. A pastor faced unexpected bills that drained his church's savings. Each time, I saw these dark entities laugh. They weren't just causing financial hardship for no reason. They had a plan. Jesus spoke, his voice firm. The enemy targets those with divine callings because they are a threat. I watched as some believers crumbled under the pressure. They grew bitter, angry at God. Some stopped praying. Others walked away from their faith completely, believing that God had abandoned them. But then, I saw something else. Some believers stood firm. A woman who had just lost everything lifted her hands in worship. A father, despite being jobless, knelt with his family and thanked God for what they still had. A pastor, instead of shutting down his church, prayed harder. And then, something incredible happened. The shadows around them began to weaken. The darkness pulled back. The believers who continued trusting God, even in their struggles, were winning battles they could not. Jesus turned to me. Your financial struggles are a sign that you carry great purpose. I felt my breath catch. The sign. I had always seen my struggles as proof that I was forgotten. But now, I saw the truth. They were proof that I was chosen. I looked back at the battle before me, and for the first time, I didn't feel defeated. I felt ready. Jesus nodded. There is still more you must understand. And the vision changed again. The vision shifted again. I found myself looking at believers who had once been faithful, devoted, and prayerful. These were people who had spent years crying out to God for financial blessings. And then, they received it. I saw one man who had once led Bible studies every week. He had prayed for financial freedom, and one day, his business exploded in success. But as time passed, his prayers grew shorter. His time with God was replaced with meetings and investments. He no longer had time for ministry. Another woman, who had once trusted God for every small need, now had more than enough. But she became obsessed with keeping her wealth. She stopped giving. She stopped trusting. She lived in fear of losing what she had gained. I watched a young pastor who had started out with a humble heart. When money flooded into his ministry, so did pride. He stopped relying on the Holy Spirit and started relying on himself. Jesus stood beside me, his face full of sorrow. Wealth obtained before its time becomes a trap, leading many away from their divine calling. I could see it clearly now. These people had once been faithful, desperate for God. But now, their hearts had drifted. They had received what they wanted, but lost what they needed. Jesus turned to me, his voice steady but filled with love. I do not withhold out of cruelty but out of love. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Love. Every moment I had struggled, every time I had begged God for more and received nothing, it was his love protecting me. I had thought my lack was punishment, but now I saw it was mercy. I turned back to the vision. The people who had once been strong in faith were now chained by their own wealth. The very thing they thought would set them free had become their prison. Tears filled my eyes. Lord, I never understood. Jesus nodded. Many do not. That is why I must show you more. And just like that, the vision changed again. The vision shifted again. This time, I saw family after family, generation after generation. At first, everything seemed normal, fathers teaching their children, mothers caring for their homes. But as I looked closer, I saw something hidden beneath the surface. There was a pattern. I saw families weighed down by the same financial struggles, over and over again. A grandfather who had worked hard but never had enough. A father drowning in debt, always just one step away from losing everything. A mother who spent every dime she earned, never able to save. Children growing up, watching their parents struggle, and then repeating the same cycle. I watched as the same mistakes were passed down. Gambling, overspending, fear of money, a mindset of lack and poverty. Then I saw my own family. My grandfather had struggled. My parents had struggled. And now, I was struggling. Tears burned my eyes. Had I been trapped in something I never even saw? Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. This is a spiritual inheritance, he said. A pattern the enemy has used for generations. But I have chosen you to break it. I turned to him, my heart pounding. Me. He nodded. You are chosen to break this cycle for future generations. I looked back at the vision. I saw a chain stretching through my family line. It had kept us bound, forcing us to fight the same financial battles again and again. Then I saw myself. And in my hands, I held something I had never noticed before. A key. Jesus spoke again. Your struggle is not just about you. It is about your children, and their children after them. When you trust me, when you choose wisdom over fear, when you break free from these patterns, your entire family line will change. A sob rose in my chest. I had thought my battles were just my own, but now I saw they were part of something far bigger. I turned to Jesus, gripping the key in my hands. What do I do? He smiled. I will show you. And once again, the vision changed. The vision changed again. I saw a group of people who had very little, yet they were full of joy. Their homes were small. Their meals were simple. Their clothes were worn. But their faces glowed with peace. I saw a woman whose cupboards were nearly empty, yet she stood in her kitchen singing praises to God. A man who had just lost his job knelt in prayer, not asking for money, but thanking God for his faithfulness. A family gathered around a small meal, smiling, laughing, giving thanks. I had never seen anything more beautiful. Jesus spoke. True prosperity is measured in faith, not money. I turned to him, my heart pounding. But how? How can they be so content when they have nothing? Because they trust me, Jesus said. They know that I am their provider, not their paycheck. They have learned the secret of contentment. I looked back at the people. Though they lacked material wealth, they had something greater. Peace, faith, joy. Then the vision shifted again. I saw others who had been given much, yet they were still empty. They had new cars, large homes, plenty of money, but their eyes were tired. Their hands trembled with anxiety. They had everything the world says should make a person happy, and yet they were never satisfied. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. If you are not faithful with little, you will not be faithful with much. Steward well what you have, and when the time is right, more will be given. I felt my breath catch. I had spent so much time focusing on what I lacked that I never stopped to thank God for what I had. Jesus smiled. Now, I will show you why many must wait. The vision shifted again. This time, I saw people who had forced their own financial breakthroughs. A woman, desperate for a home, signed a bad loan agreement. At first, she was relieved. But as time passed, she realized she was trapped in debt she could not escape. A man, tired of waiting for God to provide, took a shortcut, a dishonest business deal. He made money fast, but it came at a cost. His peace was gone. His integrity was gone. He had wealth, but no joy. Jesus turned to me. Many of my children pray for immediate wealth, but they do not see the full picture. I do not delay out of cruelty, but out of wisdom. I looked back at the scenes. The people had received what they wanted, but it had cost them more than they had expected. Jesus continued, your blessing is coming, but only when you are ready to handle it righteously. I swallowed hard. I had prayed for wealth. I had asked for more. But now, I saw what could have happened if I had received it too soon. Jesus looked at me with kindness. Trust my timing. And with that, the vision changed again. The vision began to fade, but Jesus remained beside me. His presence was so full of peace, so full of love, that I never wanted to leave. But then he placed his hand on my shoulder, and I knew it was time. Sarah, you must return. He said gently. Tell my children that I have not forgotten them. Tears welled in my eyes. Lord, so many of us feel abandoned. We pray, we give, we believe, yet we struggle. How do I make them understand? Jesus looked at me with a love deeper than the ocean. Tell them that their struggles are not punishment, but preparation. I am strengthening them, refining them, teaching them to trust me completely. I felt my heart break. All my life, I had seen my financial struggles as a sign that God was far away. But now I saw the truth. He had been with me all along. Jesus continued, many of my children grow weary because they do not see the full picture. But I do. Their breakthrough will come, not when they demand it, but when they are truly ready to carry it. His words wrapped around me like a warm embrace. Go back and tell them. A wave of light surrounded me, and everything began to pull away. I gasped as my eyes flew open. Bright hospital lights blinded me. Machines beeped. I could hear voices, urgent, frantic. She's back. Her heart's beating again. Doctors and nurses surrounded me, their faces filled with shock. I could hear one of them whisper, "She was gone for over 9 minutes. She should have brain damage." But I was completely fine. I wasn't just alive, I felt more alive than I ever had before. The memory of what I had just seen, what I had just heard, was burned into my soul. I had been in the presence of Jesus, and he had sent me back with a message. As I lay in that hospital bed, I felt something I had never known before: peace. My financial situation hadn't changed overnight. The bills were still there. My struggles weren't instantly erased. But I was different. I no longer saw my lack as a curse. I no longer feared the waiting. I no longer doubted that God was with me. Because now, I understood. I had been chosen. Not to suffer, but to be prepared. Not to be abandoned, but to be strengthened. And so are you. If you are struggling, do not lose faith. Your breakthrough is coming, not on your timing, but on God's. And when it comes, you will understand why the waiting was necessary.